It's Monday, April 21st, 2025. More judicial tyranny, this time from the nation's highest court. Senator Chris Van Hollen from the great state of El Salvador chimes in, and I think the FDA's new commissioner is barking up the right tree when it comes to the cause of autism. Next on the AM Update.
Jimmy, stories I could tell you of children that were trafficked across the border and raped.
You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes.
In the meantime, the day before he traveled, an illegal alien was arrested for murder.
I think it is the cumulative burden of all of these exposures, environmental and dietary, that alter the microbiome.
The U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling early Saturday morning blocking, at least for now, the deportations of any Venezuelans held in northern Texas under the Alien Enemies Act. The justices instructed the Trump administration not to remove Venezuelans held in Texas's Bluebonnet Detention Center until further order of this court. Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito dissented from the majority opinion. In his dissent, Justice Alito wrote, quote, "In some literally in the middle of the night," this court opinion came down in the middle of the night, Friday into Saturday, "the court issued unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule, without hearing from the opposing party within 8 hours of receiving the application with dubious factual support for its order, and without providing any explanation for its order. I refused to join the court's order because we had no good reason to think that, under the circumstances, issuing an order at midnight was necessary or appropriate. Both the executive and the judiciary have an obligation to follow the law. The executive must proceed under the terms of our order in Trump v. JGG, and this court should follow established procedures." To me, that sounds like Justice Alito is giving the executive branch license to do as they see fit as it comes to deportations. Here is White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller reminding us in the midst of yet another unprecedented overstep of the judiciary, trying to get in the way of just doing their job and deporting some of the illegal aliens that the Biden administration actively imported with nary a word from this court or many others. Here's what Stephen Miller has to say, reminding us what's truly at stake and what the judiciary is trying to enable.
Jimmy, stories I could tell you of children that were trafficked across the border and raped because of the policies of Joe Biden. There aren't enough volumes that could fit into a library to calculate the carnage that has been inflicted by the Democrat Party's policy of open borders. We can spend the rest of our lives trying to document those harms. Where does our whole country go to get repaid for all of the wealth, all of the prosperity and security that has been stolen from us by decades of uncontrolled illegal mass migration? Because we all deserve reparations for what has been stolen from us. It is a tragedy that defies our ability to even describe it.
On the topic of Mr. Abrego Garcia, the El Salvador illegal alien MS-13 gang member who was flown to El Salvador, he's back home now. The Trump administration sent him back home. You'll recall last week that was the topic of the week. Chris Van Hollen, the senator from Maryland, went down to El Salvador to stand in solidarity. He got his photo op with the gang member and woman beater. Well, on the topic of woman beating, his wife joined Good Morning America. Michael Strahan actually asked his wife about the temporary restraining order that she took out against him. Listen to how that went down.
I have to ask it. You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
My husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Wow. So a long pause. Did you live in fear of your husband? No answer. My husband is alive. Good Lord. I mean, the level of degeneracy just keeps getting worse and worse. Senator Van Hollen, who flew down to El Salvador last week, joined Fox News Sunday to discuss whether he actually flew down on the taxpayers' dime.
Who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes, like every other trip.
Here's Border Czar Tom Homan.
What bothers me more than that is a U.S. Senator traveled to El Salvador on taxpayer dime to meet with an MS-13 gang member, public safety threat terrorist. I mean, in the meantime, the day before he traveled, an illegal alien was arrested for murder were released to the streets rather than honoring an ICE detainer in his very own state. What concerns me is Van Halen never went to the border the last 4 years on Joe Biden when he had a 600% increase in sex trafficking in women and children. You have a record number of no-inspected terrorists crossing that border. You had 250,000 Americans die from fentanyl overdose because of the open border. You had over 4,000 illegal aliens died making that journey, which is a historic record. What shocks me is he's remained silent on the travesty that happened on our southern border. Many people died. Thousands of people died. I've met with hundreds of angel moms and dads who buried their children that were murdered by illegal alien. How many angel moms and dads has he met in the state of Maryland?
That was Border Czar Tom Homan on ABC this week. I'll have much more to say about immigration and, again, the judiciary overstepping, doing its own tyrannical version of whatever the lower courts have been doing. I'll have more to say in Air Analysis. But the courts weren't done quite yet. The Ninth Circuit panel, that's Clinton, Obama, and Biden appointees, denied the Trump administration a stay of injunction regarding tranny military members. In other words, the court's order that Trump can't kick out or keep the trans remains in force. And troons remain in the military. So another court from the 666th District of Siberia chimes in and says the executive doesn't have any executive power once again. A grand jury has indicted assassin Luigi Mangione on 4 federal charges, making him eligible for the death penalty. Luigi Mangione, of course, the United Healthcare CEO assassin, is being charged with stalking or indicted on stalking interstate travel, stalking use of interstate facilities, murder through use of a firearm and a firearms offense. Assassinating people, of course, should be wrong. And the message needs to be sent loud and clear. No, you should not have a fan club for assassins like Luigi Mangione has right now. You don't get to do that. So it sounds like the Trump Department of Justice is pursuing the maximum penalty here, which is death. In other news, President Trump issued his Easter message yesterday.
Easter Sunday, we celebrate his glorious resurrection and proclaim, as Christians have done for nearly 2,000 years, he is risen. Through the pain and sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, we saw God's boundless love and devotion to all humanity. And in that moment of his resurrection, history was forever changed with the promise of everlasting life. As we approach this joyous Easter Sunday, I want to wish Christians everywhere a happy and beautiful and blessed holiday. America is a nation of believers. We need God. We want God. And with his help, we will make our nation stronger, safer, greater, and more prosperous, and much more united than ever before. Thank you to everyone, and have a really happy Easter.
Amen. That's the most powerful man in the world. Pretty much clearly spelling out the gospel there. I mean, I saw Elon Musk wishing the world a happy Easter. I saw the Prime Minister of India with a couple of pretty powerful messages of Easter greetings, more powerful than the King of England. And I saw the British Prime Minister as well. We thank all the Christians for their contributions to this nation. I mean, the most popular quarterback in the sport of football, American football, Patrick Mahomes, posted yesterday, he is risen. Those are all incredibly encouraging signs. What is not an encouraging sign is what has happened to Christianity today, which happened a long time ago. But they published this story with the following message. The Bible doesn't say Jesus was nailed to a cross. One evangelical Bible scholar thinks the crucifixion may have been done with ropes. That is Christianity Today saying that. I promise you that so-called evangelical Bible scholar cited by Christianity Today is probably not evangelical, nor is he a biblical scholar. Because, of course, in the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 25, Thomas, quote, said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Just right in the gospel that this evangelical Bible scholar thinks the crucifixion may have been done with ropes. Of course, that flies in the face of everything that we know from antiquity and Roman history about the way crucifixions were actually done. Other than that, wonderful post you got there, Christianity Never. Appreciate that. When we come back, Some good news out of the state of Texas. Some bad news from Mark Zuckerberg, maybe. And I think FDA Commissioner Marty Makary is barking up the right tree when it comes to the cause of autism. That's coming up next. After trying over the course of decades to surmount obstacles laid before them by Democrats and opponents in their own party, Texas Republicans proved successful last week in passing universal school choice legislation in an 86-63 vote. The passage of Texas Senate Bill 2, which came despite the opposition of nominal Republican state representatives Dade Phelan and Gary Van de Veer. And after 11 hours of debate, it's a major victory for parents nationwide or statewide, as well as for Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who indicated earlier this year that school choice was his top priority for the 89th Texas legislature. He also helped set the stage for similar victories at the national level. Abbott, who intends to ratify the legislation after its likely adoption by the Senate, said in a statement, quote, "Today, the Texas House took the final step to advance Senate Bill 2, the largest day one school choice launch in the nation. This is an unprecedented victory for families, students, and the future of our great state." According to the Texas Tribune, this is the first time since 1957 that the Texas House has approved legislation permitting state funds to be made available for families to use on their kids' private education. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick noted that in both his current capacity and while serving as president of the state Senate, he's observed the Texas Senate pass school choice 6 times. Quote, "The first 5 bills died in the Texas House, but we never quit." Patrick lauded the persistence of his colleagues and gave a nod to the last-minute boost provided by President Donald Trump, who reportedly told state lawmakers on a conference Wednesday, quote, "This is a big vote today," and he hoped that they would vote in a positive manner. This is something that Texas activists have been working on for a long time. And there's just state legislature just could never make it happen. Well, finally, in Texas, some good news. Some good news when it comes to governance. They're finally making school choice happen, it sounds like, in the Lone Star State. Hats off to everybody involved with that effort. That is going to improve the lives of countless families in that state. So this story is something I missed in the last couple of weeks. Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri sent a letter to Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg calling on the tech billionaire to testify on Capitol Hill after a Facebook whistleblower alleged the company has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Hawley wrote in a post on social media, quote, "After yesterday's shocking revelations, it's time for Mark Zuckerberg to come to Capitol Hill, take an oath, and answer to America for how he has sold out our country's security for China profits." In his letter, Hawley lays out the allegations made by Facebook whistleblower Sarah Wynne Williams during a Judiciary Committee hearing last week. When Williams served as the director of global public policy at Facebook for almost 7 years. When Williams told the committee, quote, "We are engaged in a high-stakes AI arms race against China, and during my time at Meta, company executives lied about what they were doing with the Chinese Communist Party to employees, shareholders, Congress, and the American public." The former Facebook employee claimed the company deleted the account of a Chinese dissident living in the United States after pressure from Beijing and gave the Chinese Communist Party user data. She claims that Meta began briefing the CCP as early as 2015 and said they focused on AI and other forms of critical emerging technologies. The dissident that Wynne Williams referenced was likely Guo Wengui, whose page was temporarily shut down in 2017. At the time, Facebook claimed Wengui violated community standards. Then Senator Marco Rubio grilled Facebook General Counsel Colin Stretch about Wengui's page in 2017. Stretch then denied Facebook was ever pressured by China to delete the page. Well, this new whistleblower, Wynne Williams, is actually contradicting that earlier testimony from Facebook, saying, yes, indeed, Meta was engaged with the Chinese Communist Party, sharing user data and deleting dissidents' accounts. You'll recall back in January when Mark Zuckerberg, Meta CEO, joined Joe Rogan sporting a new haircut, a very dude bro looking look, style. And he talked about how, boy howdy, he was the victim. His company was the victim of a very censorious Biden administration. They made us do 1984 in real life. Now, I'm always encouraged when powerful people, rich people, feel the need to bend their knee to the actual people who do all the living, dying, and bill paying in this country. And that's what I thought Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg was doing back in January, joining Joe Rogan, bending the knee to the real people who delivered a victory for President Trump. Was it disingenuous? Absolutely. casting yourself as a victim when you were really aiding and abetting the Biden administration's censorship regime. That is the essence of being disingenuous. Absolutely. But now this new whistleblower claims that Meta has a lot longer, going back a decade, ties to the CCP. Maybe it's time to start doing a little bit more digging around Meta and who they've been helping, aiding, and abetting. Maybe it just didn't start and stop with the Biden administration. And now here's this. I don't feel bad sharing clips from Megyn Kelly. I like her. But I don't feel bad sharing longer clips from her episodes, given that she just happened to decide that her morning news update would be called the AM update. Nevertheless, she had a great interview recently with new FDA Commissioner Marty Makary. The topic of autism came up, and I think that new FDA Commissioner Marty Makary is barking up the right tree when it comes to a hypothesis on what's actually causing the uptick in autism. Listen to this.
Secretary Kennedy said this week that we are going to know what causes autism by September. Is that crazy talk?
No, people want to know. A lot of parents have been dealing with kids with autism. I mean, 1 in 32 kids in America today have autism. We can't just keep medicating every kid with
It was 1 in 10,000 in the 90s.
It was unheard of. And the sort of repetitive motions, the tics, the heavy, the complete nonverbal child. Where did you see that in the 1940s and 50s? And so we have to look at everything. And when you do science, you can't say, hey, we're going to do a study of what is causing this epidemic affecting 1 in 32 kids. But you can't look at these potential causes. That's not how science is done.
That's what we've been saying. And for the record, you're not saying it, but people are talking in part about vaccines because Kennedy has said it should be on the list of things we look at. Now, his critics will say he's blaming it all on the vaccine. He's blaming autism on the vaccine. I've talked to him personally. That's not what he says.
That's not what he's saying.
He says they're growing up in a toxic stew. That's one of the many things. And in particular, like the aluminum that they put in it as a preservative. Like we should be looking at everything they're consuming and we're forcing on them. Keep going.
I don't know what causes autism, but I'm deeply concerned about the rise. If I had to make a hypothesis as a scientist, not as a regulator, but as a scientist, and Dr. Bhattacharya is going to be launching a very impressive study using electronic health big data that we're helping curate. I think it is the cumulative burden of all of these exposures, environmental and dietary, that alter the microbiome. Remember, 90% of the serotonin made, which is involved in mood and mental health, is from bacteria in the microbiome. That's where it's produced. And when you mess up the microbiome, when you carpet bomb the microbiome with all of these ingredients that don't appear in nature, these are novel chemicals. What are we doing? So we've known for a long time as a scientific community that kids with autism have different stool composition, different biodiversity. So when you look at the billion different bacteria that live in the microbiome, there may be an association between changes in the microbiome and autism and things that are changing the microbiome that we've not yet fully appreciated. And that could be a whole list of things.
I think he's barking up the right tree there, although I don't think it is necessarily accurate to say tree, singular. You've heard for the longest time, why haven't they been able to find a cure for the common cold? Because there's no such thing as the common cold. It's a variety of different viruses, we're told, that cause symptoms that mimic colds. Okay? So there's no common cold. There is no one cold. Well, similarly, you hear Dr. Makary, new head of the FDA, articulating something that I've thought about as well, that it is a cumulative effect over generations of poor diet and a poor environment, where there is poison in the foods. The way that we make our foods is not good. It's not good for us. Most of what we see on the shelves at stores are really just food-like substances. They're not actually food. And what happens when you introduce that to one generation? If they're even fertile at all, they pass that on to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. This is a wide variety of factors that contribute to very poor gut health. And the reason why so many moms and so many dads attribute autism simply to the vaccine, this is my hypothesis, this is me speaking now, is because in that little baby, injecting something directly into the bloodstream that contains, and some of them do contain, heavy metals, that's the straw that broke the camel's back. I think a lot of babies are probably born with gut health that is not very good because their parents' gut health is not very good. And when you start injecting something right into the bloodstream, that's the straw that broke the camel's back. That's my hypothesis anyway. So when I heard Dr. Macri tell Megyn Kelly that he thinks it's a variety, like a whole constellation of environmental factors that mess up the microbiome in our gut, I think he's barking up the right tree there. When we come back, our analysis on why functionally, right now, we don't really have a country. It's coming up next. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. I just want to read a couple of different posts that caught my eye over the weekend to set up what I want to say about where we are as a country, if we even have one, for air analysis. I want to read this first from James Kirkpatrick, VDare James K. on X. Quote, "The Constitution doesn't protect you from the feds getting you debanked or seizing your funds without a charge, or shutting down your business, or getting raided at 3 a.m, or being totally deplatformed. It protects people who shouldn't even be in the country, though." Let me just read that over again. The Constitution doesn't protect you from the feds getting you debanked. That's happened. That's happened to conservatives. They just wake up one morning. I think, off the top of my head, Mike Lindell has experienced this. They wake up one morning and they don't have a bank anymore because of what they're saying, and the bank doesn't want to be associated with them. The Constitution doesn't protect you from the feds getting you debanked or seizing your funds without a charge, or shutting down your business, seizing your funds without a charge. I think some of the J6ers dealt with this. Or shutting down your business, COVID. Or getting raided at 3 a.m. All of these different conservative personalities over the past couple of months getting swatted. Or being totally deplatformed. Yeah, enough said. The Constitution doesn't protect you from any of that stuff. It does protect people who shouldn't even be in the country, though, according to the Supreme Court. And now I want to read you this. This is from Josiah Lippincott, who wrote over the weekend, quote, "Just so we're clear, in the past 48 hours, a senator attempted to negotiate the return of a known terrorist back to the United States." That's Chris Van Hollen. And that is a true, factual statement. A United States senator tried to negotiate the return of a known terrorist gang member, non-citizen of the United States, tried to negotiate his return back out of his home country into our country. A member of Congress took part in hostilities in a war the president is trying to end. Talking about Republican Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, who went over to the front lines in Ukraine last week for reasons only Allah knows, cosplayed as a Ukrainian trooper. The Supreme Court, Josiah says, ruled the president cannot use his constitutional powers to remove foreign invaders. The Democratic Party has publicly supported all of these moves. Over and over and over again, the message is crystal clear from the Democrat Party and the judiciary to people like you and me listening to a show like this. This is not your country. I don't know whose country it is, but it's not yours. Over and over and over again. Senator Chris Van Hollen, during a press conference, said when he was talking to the terrorist, he felt a tear form in his eye. He would never say anything like that about you or me. Never. Different country. They don't know which country they're governing, but they want you to know it's not yours. Joe Biden can import 10 to 20 million illegal aliens. And not even a peep from the nation's highest court. Creating apps that illegals can sign up for to ease their entry into the United States. Creating flights to make sure illegals get into the interior of this country as easily as possible. Not even a jot or tittle from the nation's highest court. Oh, but you start deporting the most violent of those illegals. Now, we got to make sure that every jot and tittle of every single case law that's ever been uttered in any bowel of any court anywhere throughout any modicum of human history, we got to make sure that that's followed to a T now. That you're trying to deport a few of the most egregious examples of illegal aliens. If President Trump tomorrow just tells the courts, thank you, feel free to enforce your opinion. It is not President Trump. It's not President Trump who dissolved the court's authority. It was the courts. Either we have a country or we don't. Over and over again, the message from the judiciary and the Democrat Party, and hell, even some in the Republican Party, is we have a country, it's just not yours. We're not sure what country it is, but we want to make sure that those of you living in flyover country, it's not your country. Just want to make that crystal clear. The guy that you elected to do your will. No, he doesn't get to do his job. He doesn't really have any power. He's supposed to sit there. He's just a plant, a house plant, a lampshade. He's just kind of supposed to do nothing. And we're going to make sure that he can't do anything because we want to make sure ultimately you can't do anything. The ones creating the precipice that I think we are on right now is not President Trump. It's not his supporters. We tried to do this peaceably multiple times. And you kept telling us to go get bent multiple times. So now what is required to move forward is unpleasant. But it wasn't us. It wasn't President Trump. It wasn't the president's administration that made it necessary for the unpleasantness that I think is sure to come to this country. Or it was the people who think they're governing over a completely different country than you or I live in. Functionally, right now, we don't have a country. If you can just import 10 to 20 million illegal aliens without a word from the Supreme Court or a word from Congress, but you try to remove them, and now we have to follow every single codicil, every single syllable of any single text message from clerks or interns in the 666th District Court of Siberia. We have to go through every single possible administrative process to eject the worst illegals out of this country. We don't have a country. We just don't. What is required now is that President Trump just has to tell them no. Kick rocks. I saw something that someone I respect wrote over the weekend, and it made my jaw drop, but it's true. We would be far better off under a dictatorship than judicial supremacy at this point. I don't want a dictatorship, but a dictatorship is what we will get. If the courts, the people we elect in office, do not pay attention and do not heed the will of the people. The will of the people was very clear after last November. And it's very clear that it is not being heeded. That'll do it for a Monday. Happy Monday. Pleasant Monday. We'll be back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.